What's going on, backyarders? Today I'm doing something I haven't done in a very long time. That's because in the winter I brew beer in my shop, my detached garage, and there's no heat. So dealing with water when it's freezing is just, I just buy beer during the winter. Or usually what I do is make enough to get me through the winter, to be honest with you. So I'll have an extra keg or two, and then I can just put them on the taps, and it usually gets me through winter. In fact, I have a little bit of one keg left, but that means it's time to brew some beer. Today, my favorite kind of beer, well, I've been pretty favorable of porters and stouts, but it's been winter and that's pretty normal. We'll see how spring and summer go, but I know the first beer I wanted to brew is this Fruit Bazooka IPA. It's gonna be awesome. All right, so one of the most crucial parts of brewing beer is the details, like your water chemistry, the amounts of things that you're using, and then the timing. So, it's very, very important that there's a lot of attention put into exactly how you're doing things and what you're using, exactly how much. And that starts with water chemistry. Water chemistry is something I just started getting into last year. Is it something that's gonna make a absolute, whoa, this is crazy different type of, comparison if you were able to brew the same brew doing water chemistry and not doing water chemistry? Well, I think that has to do with what your water chemistry is. For me, I just sent my water away. I do it once a year to the state lab, and they send me my water chemistry out of my water well. I have a water well, and I'm fortunate enough to have pretty good water. However, I drill wells for my day job, and I know that there's many, many places that they're not as fortunate to have good water chemistry. So if you're not using some sort of water that you've purchased, a distilled water or purified water or whatever, I would definitely make sure you look into water chemistry. And even if you are using a distilled water or purified water or something along those lines, I still recommend that you look into water chemistry and get it adjusted so that it's for the beer that you're brewing. And for me, that starts with just doing a quick Google search or whatever of the water chemistry for whatever type of beer that you're gonna brew. In this case, it's a NE IPA. And then I go to a website called Brewer's Friend, and it's magical. You just plug and play. So you plug the numbers in of what your water chemistry is, and then you plug the numbers in. In fact, you can just select from a drop-down menu of different profiles. I usually pick a balanced profile, but with an NE IPA, you just want a 2-to-1 ratio of chloride to sulfate. And if this is too much for you, take baby steps, just kind of take baby steps. That's what I did. And, the things you need to get water chemistry adjusted are the chemicals, the compounds. So baking soda, calcium chloride, things like that. I'll show you in a second. Yeah, and then you need a scale that'll do grams. So that's a pretty fine scale. You're gonna need to probably order that. You can use it as a kitchen scale, but it has to be something that gets down into specific grams and tenths of grams. That's the big factor. And then it's just a matter of weighing things out and putting them in your sparge water. Here's how I do it. I just bring my laptop into my shop or my brewing area with me. And then, like I said, after I get the profile that's desired for the beer that I'm looking for, and the main thing for an NE IPA is a 2-to-1 chloride to sulfate ratio. I got my water test results from the lab, and then I broke those out into the elements that are vital to brewing. And so what I do is I plug and play. So my source minerals right here, calcium, magnesium, sulfate, sodium, chloride, HCO3, and alkalinity. Those are the elements that are in play here. And so on the first row, I put what my water profile is, and that's the sheet from the health department. If your health department doesn't do results that are that detailed, you can buy some home testing kits to nail that down as well. And then my target minerals come from a balanced profile, which is in a drop-down menu right up here. So there's several profiles that you can pick. And that kind of makes it easy. With an NE IPA, you want a balanced profile, but you want a 2-to-1 chloride to sulfate ratio. I'm gonna go ahead and do the math, get these adjusted, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so I got it all figured out. And basically what you do is you just plug and play in the additions here, different grams of those additions. And what that does is it adjusts your numbers. So just real quick, if I were to change the chalk to 1, watch the numbers up in here. And see that? It changed the HCO3. And so now all my numbers here are in green, and that's what you're looking for. You just go through these adjustments and change the grams. You can get into tenths of grams if you need to, but it's usually not necessary to get this bottom row here into green. And then if you scroll down, this is a really cool part. It gives you these stars, so that tells you you're in an excellent level as far as your water chemistry. It tells you, your sulfate to chloride ratio, and this is what I was talking about with the NE IPA. It's a highly malty beer, and that is going to be perfect. It's also great for an amber beer. And then it gives you some other notes and things and warnings. Make sure that you're within the recommended generalized brewing range. And it's just a great site. Check out brewersfriend.com, and this will make it very simple for you. Welcome to my laboratory, and this is my scale. It does grams and tenths of grams, which is the important thing. And so what I want to do is just put my container there on the scale, tare the scale, which means it gets rid of the weight of the container. And we're going to start with 1 gram of chalk. Now the trick here is to do one at a time, because you're going to put a little too much at times. And if you're doing more than one at a time, it's impossible to do this correctly. So 1 gram of chalk is what we're looking for. Sprinkle it in there. You see that's 1.2. So I'm going to take a little out. So now I'm going to take that and dump it into my other container. And this other container is where I'm going to put everything, and then I'll put it into brewing water. I'm going to go ahead and do this for all the different elements that I need to according to Brewer's Friend, and then I'll meet you over at the HLT. This is my brew setup. If you guys haven't seen any of my videos before, I encourage you to go check out some of the past brew videos as well as the Home Brew Wednesday videos, and that'll kind of run you through my equipment a little better. First thing I did when I came in was I went ahead and put 6 gallons of water in my HLT tank and started heating it up. So all brewing recipes should come with some sort of instructions that are going to give you most of this information. It says clearly to do 1.5 quarts per every pound of grain that you have. Well, the great thing about Northern Brewer's kit is it doesn't come in multiple packs, the grain that is. It comes in 1 pack. So that makes it very simple. I have 13.5 pounds and it's labeled right on the bag. Times 1.5 quarts equals 20.25, which equals 5.06 gallons. Now, to heat 5.06 gallons up in my equipment, it takes almost a gallon to do that, so I went ahead and put 6 gallons, and I'm heating it to about 185. The reason for 185 is the mash is supposed to be 152 for 60 minutes. Well, I have to transfer the water from the HLT where it's heating up over to the mash tun, and then it has to heat the mash tun up. So usually I find in my setup that takes about 20 degrees. So I want to make sure I'm at least 172, and I like to be safe. Once you transfer it and get it out of the HLT, to transfer it back and reheat it, that is a nightmare. It just wastes a lot of time. So take it up higher than you need to, and then you can let it cool off. And it won't take that long to cool off. You can even splash it with a little cool water if you want to, but I'd be very careful with that because it can change quick. So I use a pump setup, and what that means is, instead of picking these things up or having them at different elevations, I can keep them all pretty much at the same elevation and let my pump do the transferring for me. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's so much safer than picking up 5 or 7 or 10 gallons of boiling hot water and transferring it. It's a lot quicker that way, but this is a lot safer. The first hose I'm going to hook up goes to the intake on the pump, and I have quick connects on all the different devices to make sure this is quick and easy. Now you want to be careful with the HLT because it's hot. Quick and easy. And then the second hose is going to go from the outlet of the pump into the mash tun. Now I'm gonna open the valve all the way to the mash tun so the water can get in with no restriction. I'm gonna open the valve on my outlet side of the pump. And then I'm going to go ahead and open the valve for the HLT. This is going to allow the hot water to start cycling through, and then I'll turn the pump on. Now I have my pump plugged into a circuit here that I've extended from a wall outlet so I can do this out in the middle of the floor without any problems or, big extension cords. I don't know if you can see it, but on the back wall, there's markings for the gallons. I'm gonna put it just over 5 gallons in here. Details are everything when you're brewing beer. So I always double check my thermometer that's on the kettle with my thermopen. You probably can't see that. It says 184. So we want this to get down to about 152, and it's gonna do that really easily if you just leave the lid off. So here you can see the grains we're using. A raw premium Pilsner malt, 10.5 pounds, 1.5 pounds of rolled oats, and 1.5 pounds of raw white wheat malt. Now's the time I'm gonna go ahead and add the elements, the salts, to get the water to the right chemistry. Give that a little stir. And now we're gonna go ahead and add the oats. You're gonna lose about 10 degrees or so when you're putting the grains in. Put a little in. Give it a stir. More in. Give it a stir. I'm gonna add these slow so that it doesn't dough up into balls. Keep the water moving. Now we want to stir. Make sure it's nice and mixed up. So I only lost 8 degrees on the transfer. That's, usually I lose around 15. And then on the mashing itself, usually I lose about 10 degrees, and that's about what I lost. So I'm gonna watch the thermometer. I need to be at 152. And if for some reason I get more than 3 or 4 degrees below 152, I'm not gonna go any higher because I'm at 153, 154 right now. And so, if I need to add a little bit of water, I'm gonna go ahead and fill the HLT back up with the sparge amount of water, which is 2 quarts per pound of malt, just like we did in the original, except it's 2 instead of 1.5. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that water boiling so that if I need any of it, I can use it. I'm using the Blickman Hellfire burner. Love this thing. It produces heat, a lot of it, and really fast. I do want to go ahead and disconnect the hose so that it doesn't melt with it being so close to the burner. In the back here is the vent where I can control the flame. And what that does is it gives you a cleaner fire when you get it adjusted just right. I went ahead and put 8 gallons in. I don't have to use it, but it'll be there if I need it. Okay, so the instructions said to mash for 60 minutes and then raise the temperature of the mash up to 170. I've been checking the temperature. Well, I got a thermometer right on the front of the mash tun, and it's been spot on, 152 all the way through. So that's real nice. I think it's about 1 degree high. I checked it with my thermopen twice, and I was about 1 degree, maybe 2, a little bit 2 degrees lower than what it says on the thermometer on the mash tun. But what I did is I went ahead and got 8 gallons of water up to basically boiling temperature, and now I'm going to transfer some of that over to the mash tun until I get to 170 degrees. Once it's at 170 degrees, we're going to let it sit for 10 minutes. I want to be careful with this on the flow because I don't want it to go flying in there. I just want to add a little bit at a time. So we're gonna start off pretty closed down. Valves open from the hot water, the HLT, going into the inlet of the pump. The outlet hose I have just barely open, and that's going into the mash tun. I'm gonna open the mash tun. Actually, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm actually going to, instead of connecting the hose to here, I'm gonna connect it on the side of the mash tun, and that's gonna basically let that hot water just kind of dribble in there with my sparge. So I'm gonna go ahead and monitor this, and when this thermometer gets to 170, and I'll double check it with the thermopen, I'm gonna let it sit for 10 minutes. We've let this sit for about 12 minutes. So now what I'm gonna do is very slowly with the valve just a hair open, is start transferring the wort from the mash tun. I'll have this ball valve just slightly open into the pump, and then on the outlet of the pump it comes around and goes into the boil kettle, which is right here. And so what I'm looking for is about four gallons or so. And once I get about 4 gallons, I'm gonna go ahead and start the sparge process. I'm gonna do a batch sparge. It's just, for me, it's an easier setup because I can use my pump that way rather than putting the boil kettle down on the ground and doing a fly sparge by gravity. I like the batch sparge, and the whole point of sparging and the mash tun is to get all the sugars out of the grains that you can possibly get. And I think just with the timing and the way, if you do things just right, it really doesn't matter that much, in my opinion. Now, I haven't done any tests on that, but I'm sure there's other YouTubers that have. So let's go ahead and start transferring nice and slow.
That's a pretty good flow rate, maybe a little fast. I'm gonna turn it down a little more.
Okay, so I collected just a little more than 4 gallons of wort, and that is in the boil kettle. Now I'm gonna close down these valves. And what I need to do is transfer the sparge water into the mash tun, and I'm gonna do it through the sparge device at the top. And once I get, I want to put probably 4 gallons in there or so, I'm gonna stir it up, and then we'll let it sit for about an hour and get all the sugars out of there we can possibly get. Keep that towel in there for that little bit that drips out. That way we don't make a bigger mess than we have to. And our inlet valve is off. Same thing, keep that towel under there. Keep it from making too much of a mess. That drip out. And this goes to the HLT. This may be hot. And so we're gonna open our valve to the HLT. It's gonna run to the inlet of the pump. And again, we wanna control the flow here, so we're just gonna crack it. And then, of course, there is no valve up here on the sparge device, so let's go ahead and start transferring. So we're looking for 6.75 gallons for the sparge. And I already put some of that in when we were raising the temperature of the mash originally. So give it a nice stir. We're gonna change these hoses up one more time, and this is because I'm gonna recycle the sparge. So I'm gonna take the outlet, I'm gonna go into the inlet of the pump. Ooh, that's hot. Okay. Open that valve. The other hose is already set up. Again, I'm going to control the flow with this valve on the pump. All right, so we've been sparging along for an hour, and I did 45 minutes with it recirculating, and then my temperature is dropping. It got down to 149, 148, somewhere in there. And so I turned the recirculation off, because as it's recirculating, you're losing some heat through the hose and all the, the transferring. If you get low, you want to kill the pump and just kind of let it sit. And really, it's going to be fine. It's just going to help optimize, with that recirculation. As much as I was able to do, 45 minutes was quite a bit. Going to optimize my sugars and hopefully allow me to get the most out of this grain that I can possibly get. Now I've got my hoses changed up, so I'm taking the mash tun, and I got a hose here going to the inlet of the pump, And then the outlet of the pump is going to my boil kettle. And I'm gonna try to capture a little over 6 gallons because I'm gonna lose a gallon or so during the boil. So I'm gonna get just above 6 gallons, and that'll make sure that I end up with at least 5 gallons of beer. So let's go ahead and get this transferred. I'm gonna open this valve just a little. And again, I like to sparge, or I like to transfer when we're talking about the mash tun. I like to pull it, gradually. I like to transfer gradually. That way you don't get stuck mash. If you've ever had a stuck mash, it's a nightmare. So this has been one of the smoothest brew days I've ever had. Fingers crossed, knocking on wood. So hopefully it'll continue that way. We're halfway home. So let's get this wort transferred over to the boil kettle. Valves open here. Valves partially open, fully open, and let's turn it on. We're all transferred. I got just a hair over 6 gallons. She is full, the Blickman boil kettle. And now I'm gonna turn this valve off. Got my pump valve off to the mash tun, so everything should just kind of be ready to go here. I just need to take this hose off so we don't melt it when we're boiling. Remember, we got this hot liquid here. There's quite a bit of it. This hot wort. Try not to make any more of a mess than I have to. Leave that towel right there for now. So this is going to be very careful when you bring it to a boil. So right after you get over 200, you're going to start seeing this foam. And this is when you need to be very careful because it will boil over on you in a hurry. You got to bring it into a boil slowly, ease it in, cut the heat, just kind of play with it until you get a nice steady rolling boil. So I'm not going to videotape this because I want to be able to concentrate on it and I don't want it to boil over, but I just want you to be aware of that. The other time it can boil over is when you add hops. When it's boiling hot and you put hops in it, you can have a hop break where it just volcanoes out the top. However, we're not adding any hops in this beer during the boil. All the hop additions are going to be just after the boil or at dry hopping when it's being fermented. All right, so we have a nice rolling boil. Now I'm going to ease the heat back up so I can get a pretty aggressive boil. Beers do better when you get a real aggressive boil, but I don't have a whole lot of room from the top of the wort to the top of the pot, so I'm going to have to be very careful with this one. So here's our hop additions, and we have 4 ounces of 4 different hops. We're going to put these in as soon as the boil is done. Okay, so it's been an hour. We're going to cut the heat. And I've had my wort chiller in for about 10 minutes or so to sterilize it. But now I went ahead and I put all the hops in a hop bag. And now I'm going to go ahead and steep these for 20 minutes with the lid on. So we're just going to kind of get these hops rolling. They smell so amazing. And we can do this because the temperature is still so high on the wort. So we're just going to steep those. I'm going to, kind of move them up and down, swirl them around about every 5 minutes or so. And then I'm going to turn the wort chiller on. We're going to chill this wort down to pitching temperatures, which is about 80 degrees. All right, guys, it's been 20 minutes and I've had my hops steeping in here and it smells just absolutely wonderful. I'm gonna go ahead and drain the bag, and I've turned my wort chiller on so it's starting to bring the wort down in temperature. And so basically what I have is a copper coil. Cold water's coming in from the hose, goes through it, and then it discharges out a pipe, and I'm running that out into the yard. It's just water. So I'm just going to stir this with the wort chiller until we get to 80 degrees. Once we get to 80 degrees, which will take about 15 minutes or so, I'll go ahead and bring it back and we'll pitch the yeast after transferring it to the fermenter. But the critical point comes once you get below about 150, 160, 150. So at that point, you want to make sure that you're not letting anything contaminate the wort. And we've come this far. You just don't want to let something silly, a silly mistake, mess up everything I've done. So just know that that 150, 160 range. That's when it starts to. You got to really start paying attention to what you're doing, making sure everything is sanitized with Star San, which is what I'm using, and that way we can get some wonderful beer. So I'll bring you back when we're transferring. So you can see we are right at 5 gallons. That means everything went, almost as perfect as it could get. And we're getting ready to hit 80 degrees, so we'll start transferring. You can see I have my hop basket in there for all the dry hopping I'm going to do. So that'll be all set up. It's all sanitized and everything. So I'll just be able to drop that in and make things a lot easier later. Chiller running, we're going to start transferring. Make sure the valves are closed on the fermenter, and they are. I'm going to go ahead and add some oxygen. All sanitized, ready to roll. Just going to hit it for a couple of seconds. That's perfect. I'm going to use this. Never tried this before. And since I've never used it before, I'm going to go ahead and use some dry yeast as well, just to be safe. I know this stuff will work. Put our lid on. And now we are safe. And put a little bubbler on there. Probe inside, and that comes out to my controller. And I have the little heater as well as the refrigerator plugged into it. What do you see that doesn't look right? That's right, there's no air. No air. So that either means the fermentation is done or something went wrong. What I've been worried about is something went wrong because I haven't had any air since day one. So much so that on day 3, when I went to dry hop, I went ahead and put another packet of dry yeast in. And I'm laying in bed last night thinking about, just upset that you put all that work in and it's not going to turn out right. And I'm like, well, what is it I did different that I hadn't done before? Because I've never had that problem. Is the thermostat, is the controller working properly? Yes, everything seems to be working. I've double and triple checked everything, but there is one thing that I did different that I hadn't done before. I'm going to show you here in just a second. It's time to go ahead and do the second dry hopping. I'm sterilizing the hop bags. I'll tear those open and put those into the hop basket there. It's like my favorite part is smelling the hops. Oh man, it smells good. This is the underside of the lid. See this gasket? we're not getting a good seal because that hop basket is sitting between there. So this is the only way to tell how much fermentation has happened. So I recorded my original gravity at 1.062. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the gravity that it currently is at, and this is going to tell us how much fermentation has actually happened. That's a good thing. That's a real good thing. That's a really awesome number. I started with an original gravity of 1.060. The recipe called for 1.062. I was a little bit short of that. Not a big deal. But I used that extra pack of yeast, and I've never done that before. So I was very curious how this is going to turn out. The current gravity is 1.008. And so that gives me an ABV of 6.83. So great little tool here. I love simple, useful tools like this. And Brewer's Friend has a lot of those on their site, so check them out. We've had a lot of fermentation. And what I can tell you is that the smell, and I've had the smell the whole time. So that's why I've been okay. I've suspected something was going on. I had a leak or something because the smell inside the refrigerator is just so juicy. I mean, so juicy. It's almost like it's not alcohol or grain, or it's just like a juice right out of a tropical plant of some kind. I mean, it's amazing smelling. Now, I haven't tasted it. I tasted it before it started fermentation, and I'm not going to break I usually wait until it's done fermenting before I take my final taste. So I can tell you the original taste was one of the best tasting on the palate, on the tongue, one of the best tasting prior to fermentation. So I'm excited to see how it's turned out because I've done nothing but just dry hop it. And that was the second round of dry hops. And I think I may dry hop it again tomorrow with another pack or two that I have in the freezer left over from another brew. I'm not sure. I'm on the fence about that. But the great news is, and you were here to witness it with me, the fermentation has definitely happened. The beer is in good shape. And we're 6 days in now. This is the 6th day. And so I'll probably let it go for another 2 days, depending on if I dry hop it or not. And then I'm going to go ahead and keg it. And then it's on to the next brew. Thanks for joining me for the whole video, guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see you on the next video.